Greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzin. Aaron McIntyre going to be joined by our friend and colleague Rob Eno for the Deace Group here in just a matter of moments. We're brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They're America's only American mobile phone provider. Make the switch today to a company that has been leading the way on the cutting edge, on the vanguard of building the alternative economy many of us long for, that is arriving, but not yet here. Well, it is here fully when it comes to one device we all need to use to thrive in modern America. That is our mobile phones. Make the switch today. And not only will you no longer have to give your money directly to people who hate you, but you'll get all the same great service in terms of signal coverage across the country. You can switch networks. They've got multiple networks within their main hub. You can switch anytime you want for free as a member. You get an actual U.S.-based customer service team, which means you'll be able to understand what they actually say, right? And this is a company that reinvests back into the values that you as a conservative are trying to conserve. I've seen it with my own eyes. All right. So if you want to make the switch here today, keep your number, switch your number, upgrade your phone, keep your phone, whatever you want to do. They'll customize it for you as best they can, give you a free month of service to get you started when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve and use the offer code Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve. And also the second issue, speaking of on the vanguard, the second issue of Blaze Frontier is out now. It includes a feature from yours truly, the 10 movies every dad needs to watch with his son before he lets him launch from his home on his own. But that's just some of the stuff that's included in every quarterly edition of Frontier. And it's you can only access it, by the way, by becoming a Blaze Plus subscriber. All right. So if you want to get that, I mean, that's where you go the extra mile. You get dedicated customer support, VIP treatment, exclusive members only content, a premium experience with exclusive events and VIP opportunities. That comes when you go all the way with your Blaze Media subscription today. And if you act right now, the first 500 people who subscribe get both issue 1 and issue 2 together for the full Frontier experience. That's blazeunlimited.com/Deace right now. Use promo code BLAZE500 to get $40 off your subscription. blazeunlimited.com/Deace. That's blazeunlimited.com/Deace. Use the promo code BLAZE500 to get $40 off your subscription. All right, coming up next hour, it'll be Feedback Friday, but let's get hour 1 started as we always do with the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was begins, as it always does, with issue 1, Bleep, Lord Nefarious Says.
I will speak loud for those who cannot speak. I'm a proud he, she, they, them, whatever.
Well, I don't care. I hate you.
That's mean.
I know, but I hate you. I don't care. I hate you. You're all the people who are spreading propaganda, letting the rise of fascism and putting women down.
That's not
what it is. No. That's serious?
Hi, I'm Rosie, Texas English teacher and transgender goddess, here with just a couple of thoughts about some gender euphoria that I've been feeling today.
Because we in these hot-ass Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now.
The alternative is rioting. It's vandalism. It's breaking things. If you're like, oh no, well you talked about Bernie and AOC as controlled opposition, but like, what's the alternative? The alternative is vandalism and rioting and like destroying property.
We need a Democratic Party that fights.
My mother, she took me to pride parades. I have to laugh when I hear the right wing carry on about the dangers of exposing kids to trans people or same-sex couples, because I'm living proof that introducing your kids to the gay agenda might result in them growing up to be governor.
I mean, will we still need humans?
Not for most things. We'll decide.
I keep thinking, okay,
this is going to be
This is going to change the way folks, they're gleeful. Everybody I know who voted for Trump is gleeful and supportive.
All right, Rob Eno, as the guest, we go to you first, brother. What was, as we have the opening question, what was the worst of the worst for you and why?
I think it's the Jasmine Crockett piece, mainly because by the grace of God, I live 4 miles outside of her district. If I lived a little bit more, I'd be right in it, and it's just an embarrassment to the entire DFW Metroplex that she is. But one of the things that's not on there is about 450 miles north of me and about 200 miles southwest of you right now. Lord Nefarious is having his fun at the Kansas State Capitol. And I ask that everybody just pray to make sure that the Satanists don't get their way.
On Jasmine Crockett, many of our people are just beginning to learn who this woman is, Rob. Okay? And I've alluded to this a couple of times on the show, and I'm going to keep hammering this point home. I'm more ghetto than she is. She's just black. Okay? I had a single mom. I was on food stamps. I was on adults and dependent children. I was on reduced lunch. I ate government cheese. We couldn't afford cable when I was little, so my uncle, who was one of the local cable installers, back when you used to have to install it on the poles, used to climb up there and hack into it when he did an install on our street so that we could get free cable at my house. This woman has gone to exclusive schools. This is faker than Hillary Clinton's Ebonic accent. Faker than Joe Biden. Going to put you all in chains. Dude, you're from Delaware, bro. Delaware, okay? Delaware. She's the Dennis Van Winkle. There's just something about people there from the DFW who, grew up in really exclusive neighborhoods and wealthy cul-de-sacs, who believe that they are now able to essentially play the role of hardcore gangsta thug. So that was Dennis Van Winkle when we were kids. Most of you know him today as Vanilla Ice. Jasmine Crockett is Vanilla Ice. There's nothing ghetto about her at all. Nothing. This entire thing, the fake eyelashes, the whole thing. It's literally. We used to make this reference on the show a lot, but it's come full circle. It's literally Cherry Girl come to life. That's literally what she is. There's nothing real about what she is selling whatsoever. The entire thing is fake. And I'm just on my final last freaking nerve with the racialism stuff. I've just had it. Okay? And I'm no more fake Ebonics, fake ghetto. Nope. You're not ghetto. You're just black. Stop it. I'm more ghetto than you are. Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
No problem. I've got a friend here that I play board games with that used to be a Democratic member of the Texas House of Representatives. And he is just flabbergasted by the way she acts now, because she never acted that way in the Texas House of Representatives. Just like you said, it's all an affectation. It's all fake. She used to sound, as Joe Biden might have once said, eloquent, and like Barack Obama. I forget exactly what Joe Biden said about Barack Obama, but that sort of thing. And this is completely and utterly all put on for the camera.
Correct.
So you hit it right, the nail on the head.
And I think we just need to start calling this out right from the start now. The term racism, if anything, it's lost so much potency now that you can actually probably be a racist and get away with it now, because it's just an automatic fake out for people. So I just think it's time to treat this entire racialist garbage with maximum prejudice, starting with her. Todd, what about you?
Well, that's where I was going to go, because we don't know how to do that. We're in trouble. Whether it's Jasmine Crockett in, as you said, Texas, or that little boy who knocked over the stuff on the table. I think, if memory serves, that was in UNC Asheville, which is in the heart of the area of North Carolina that was destroyed by the storm. I think that's where that was. But so a conservative area. And then right after that, the tranny teacher. In all cases, even that's in a liberal enclave, did the men who are parents of the kids in that classroom, if they're liberal, were they not fighting for women's rights this whole time, and now they're letting that happen? In all cases, these people are possible because of the masses who allow it to be possible. Mostly the men. They got other stuff to do. All of that is absolutely crazy. Again, no rhetorical flourish. Literally crazy. Did that kid get expelled? What's the word on the street there in Texas about what's going to happen to Jasmine Crockett? We get what we deserve, folks. It's as simple as that.
Aaron?
I'm going to put a little bit more meat on the bones of what Rob was talking about that's going on potentially as we speak in Kansas right now. I can't remember the exact name of the group, but it was a satanic enclave in Kansas announced that they're going to be holding a black mass, just the upside down inverse demonic version of a traditional Catholic mass, at the Kansas state capitol this morning. Kansas's Democrat governor decreed that this black mass has to take place outside of the State House building. The satanic group is planning on, or tried to, I haven't seen any updates yet, said they're going to defy the Democrat governor, walk into the Capitol, and hold this satanic black mass. That's what's happening in Kansas right now. There's a rally that was planned at a Catholic church just across the street from the Capitol that's going on, I think, as we speak as well. So putting a little bit more meat on the bones of what Rob was talking about there a little bit ago. Worst of the worst is Bill Gates. You know, Jimmy Fallon asks that unwitting, simple, but brilliant question. Hey, kind of sounds like AI might mean the end of the need for humans. Is that true, Mr. Gates? And Bill Gates is like, yeah, kind of, actually. And then he says this. We'll decide. Mm-hmm. We'll decide. I'm sure he's talking about
the collective humanity.
I'm
of course.
sure he's talking about the we, right? The collective we, right? Nope. He might think he's talking about the collective we, but we all know. We weren't born yesterday. We all lived through 5 years ago, 4 years ago. We know the we that he's talking about.
Let's get to the exit question, because I want us to have plenty of time to discuss the next topic. All right. Exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the odds our friend and sister Jill Savage has to ever worry about being sexually harassed by Lindsey Graham. And 10 being the odds Lindsey Graham is a closeted homosexual betrayer, and it's to the shame of a Bible Belt state like South Carolina that they have permitted an effeminate globalist traitor to represent them all these years in the Senate. Rank this week's level of total depravity. Rob.
I'm going to go with 5. It can always be worse.
Wow. A 5. Todd.
10.
Todd is at a 10, of course.
10.
Aaron is at a 10. All right. Let's get to issue 2. Paula White.
What in the world is this?
And I believe that when you honor God on Passover, starting on April 12th at sundown through Good Friday on the 18th.
That's Paula White doing Paula White things.
You can receive these 7 supernatural blessings for you and your house. According to Exodus 23, God will assign an angel to you. He'll be an enemy to your enemies. He'll give you prosperity. He'll take sickness away from you. He will give you long life. He'll bring increase in inheritance, and he'll give a special year of blessing. You're not doing this to get something, but you're doing it in honor to God, realizing what you can receive.
For your special Passover offering of $1,000 or more as the Holy Spirit leads, you will also receive the beautiful 10-inch Waterford Crystal Cross. Don't miss your moment to release 7 supernatural blessings and provision into your life.
You know that Leonardo DiCaprio meme?
Yes.
Okay, I know this one, right? You know what I'm talking about? I've seen this before. I know this one. As soon as a coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. I've heard this before. I've heard this one before. It's an old ditty. It's charted before. Now, here's why I wanted to bring this up, okay? Because I actually did not want us to discuss this in a theological context. We can. I'm openly fine with that. I mean, I would assume everybody here is some variation of ashamed of literally every syllable she just uttered. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we can discuss this theologically if you would like, okay? Because I'm always up for a good theo conversation. But I am fascinated by this from a political perspective. Because this is really why this matters to an audience like the Blaze right now. Because we are under the backdrop of we are in a cold civil war. I mean, you just articulated the sides a minute ago, Aaron, with your description of what's going on at the Kansas State Capitol, right? All right, so let's start there. Does anybody on the panel disagree? And if you do, fine, let's hear it. But does anybody on the panel disagree we are in a cold civil war? Anybody disagree with that?
No.
Rob, you disagree? Okay. So a civil war would mean there are two sides, right? Okay. So, and of course, within these sides, there are variations, like the Church of Satan there is defying the Democratic governor, for example, even though she, politicizes the doctrines of what they believe. So we're going to have differences of opinions. Todd and Rob are Catholic. Aaron and I are evangelical. We'll have differences of opinions on things, but I think we all view ourselves as part of a coalition united against the kinds of things like what's happening at the Kansas State Capitol right now. Is that we still okay?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody still good?
Yeah.
All right. Yep. All right. So when you're in a coalition, like when you're in a family is a coalition. Not everybody in the family has the same opinions on everything. Not everybody's a monolith. Not everybody has the same talents, gifts, abilities, or sensibilities about what to do with the ones that they have. Okay, and so you have to manage a coalition, and yet there are moments where what is being done within the coalition or could be done to that coalition by allowing something to go unconfronted. Therefore, the juice becomes worth the squeeze. You do the math, you count the cost, and you come to the conclusion that this is going to cause disruption in this coalition. It may risk permanent disruption on one end, if not managed well. It could certainly be a long-term or indefinite, could last days, weeks, months, maybe years. We don't do Christmas together, for example. But this is so indeterminable, it has to be confronted. All right? And so I want to couch that distinction or that dilemma in this language. Is Paula White a problem that needs to be fixed or addressed? Meaning her baggage, which is elevated because she runs the White House Faith Office and she oversees the president's faith advisory team. Is her baggage like the just open heresy? I mean, the gospel is free, but it came at a great cost, a cost that's already been paid for you. Anybody that comes to you and says you have to go through them to get access to it, especially to give them money, they are either at best demonically deceived themselves or at worst a demonic deceiver. For example, I told a friend of mine in conservative media today, because he's like, I cannot believe you've not been losing your mind over the Lindsey Graham, endorsement online. And I said, well, right now, and I've already explained this to my audience, I just said this a couple days ago. Right now, I am trying to expend whatever political capital I have to get a hold and to convince this White House it has to stand up to the courts, has to defy the courts, or it's not going to have a presidency. And I haven't even told you guys this yet. I got word yesterday. I know that the Blaze article I wrote on Monday, I know it was read in the White House. I've been given confirmation, including by some people you would want to read it in the White House. Now, we also know the Trump administration kind of monitors things and lives online, right? And no one's got time to listen to everybody's individual show. Sure, we did talk about it on our show, but online I've not said much. Why? Because I'm trying to get their attention right now, because in my view, this is the math I've done. You can have different math when you have your own show or your own account. But to me, if they stand up to the courts and restore that balance of power, that is akin to Reagan ending the Soviet Union. Did Reagan have a perfect presidency? Did he do the amnesty in 86? Did he give the vaccine manufacturers, unlimited liability? Did we run at the time record deficits? Was it a perfect presidency? No. But was that the generational win of our time? Yes. That covers a multitude of sins. You know what I'm trying to say? Trump putting the courts back where they belong and restoring the power back to government by the consent of the governed again would be a generational win as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to overlook a lot of things because I also know the South Carolina GOP pretty much sucks. All right. So I'm going to overlook a lot of things if we can get them to do that. So what am I willing to risk for them to turn me off and tune me out in order to get what I think is a generational level win? Now, I made an exception where Paula White is concerned because to me, she's using her platform to corrupt the gospel. And my worldview says the gospel's up here. It's number one. And lots of other things can vie for number 2, but it's spacebar, it's spacebar, it's spacebar, it's spacebar, way down the list. So this is one area where I chose to go ahead and comment on this on social media critically. So the question becomes, I think, her baggage. Is it a problem that needs to be fixed because it could get in the way of Trump's agenda? Or is it a vice, like Grant and his whiskey bourbon, like JFK and Marilyn Monroe? We don't approve of it. We know what's going on. Wouldn't recommend others do it. Certainly wouldn't want our sons to emulate it. But it's not worth blowing that up out of proportion right now, given what else is at stake within the coalition. Do you think that's a healthy way of framing this first and foremost before we discuss it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? All right. So, Aaron, I'll start with you. Is this a problem that must be fixed because it gets in the way of the overall agenda? Or is she just a vice of his that we're just going to have to learn to live with as a sunk cost for now?
Okay. I want to repeat this twice so people understand the context in which I'm analyzing this. This is cold, hard, what I believe is political analysis. You can agree with me or you can disagree with me. I'm not making a spiritual analysis. We already just assented to that. We all agree she is a heretic. She is in error. Although I might be interested in sending $1,000 as the Spirit leads, if I too can have a private pianist follow me around playing ethereal, beautiful music. Okay, so this is not a spiritual analysis. This is a political coalition analysis. I don't think that she is at the point now where she's getting in the way of accomplishing his agenda. Is it James Boasberg or Paula White? James Boasberg is getting in the way right now, not Paula White. I don't think there's any debate about that. Do I want her to be there? No. Do I wish that they would kick her to the curb? Yes. Do I think that that is necessary at this moment? Again, cold, hard political analysis, not a spiritual analysis. I don't think she's there right now.
Okay. Rob, you're next. What do you think?
Yeah, I think she's not there. I would love to see her gone. I would have loved to see someone like Father Ripperger be here. His spiritual advisor, but I don't think that anybody, I think if you asked 1,000 people who Donald Trump's faith advisor is, 999 would tell you he has a faith advisor. I mean, I think it's at that level. I don't think people realize that he even has a faith advisor. I'd love to see her go. I think that it's stupidity. I can't imagine the other pastors, priests, bishops, whoever are on that council having to deal with her leading the council. But there are bigger fish to fry, I think, temporally. And I think that people aren't going to listen to this. And I'm still, not to get too theological, I thought there was a guy that nailed 95 Theses to stop this at one point in time. Apparently, as a Protestant pastor, she did not get that memo. And to say, I think that it is a little bit of a vice, right? Because Donald Trump grew up in a prosperity gospel church in Queens. So I think this is what he thinks the church is. So I think there's that too.
That's a very important point. I remember the event where I was supposed to agree to go to work for him. And he talked about Norman Vincent Peale was his favorite theologian. And I remember thinking, and the audience had like no idea who that was. I'm like, I know who that is because I'm a Theo nerd. And that Norm Vincent Peale was the forerunner of Joel Osteen, Crystal Cathedral. He essentially is the architect of much of the what we call today, prosperity or oriented gospel, either heterodoxy or flat out heresy. He's basically the godfather of it, and that's what you're alluding to, Rob, is that Trump grew up in the shroud or the shadow of that. Todd, what do you think here? Is she a nuisance? So it's not worth blowing things up over right now, or is she a problem?
I think she's a problem. I think we need to go back to our King Saul analogies. If you read how that plays out, there's plenty of people you're meant to understand, and I have no particular backstory. Well, that person was evil in Scripture. King Saul is a cautionary tale. King Saul was anointed. King Saul had many great gifts. King Saul was
a hero.
Yes, that's what I'm.
Saved the people of Israel.
Yeah, came from humble beginnings, just like David, but the cursing, the madness of King Saul playing out, and ultimately ended up, praying to witches. Like I don't know. how it's impacting her, but that's not just a theological story. That's a political story. That's a dynasty story. And we've talked about, he's the only one who's doing king things. Well, it's not, and here's the worst part about it. If you it doesn't, Protestant or Catholic, she's playing with fire, because it's not a total. This is where the blaspheming the Holy Spirit, the unforgivable sin, comes in. This is what's going on there. There's a lot of on earth as it is in heaven going on right there. But does it come through the gateway of Paula White asking for $1,000 for a crystal cross? And I don't so any Christian in good standing can ultimately say we're playing fiery with here that we just don't understand. Can I see how it's happening? Not right now. I can't. But
all right, Aaron, you want to respond? Go ahead.
I respect that, Todd. I would just say this as well. Again, false choices that I'm coming up here, but we live in a fallen world. We don't get the greatest choices all the time. Would I rather have a vice president with a 100% biblical worldview, which I don't know if J.D. Vance is up to my level yet, but he's pretty close, I think.
Yeah.
Or would I rather have the faith advisor?
What if he pays you $1,000?
Have a 0% worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's a false choice. I'd like to have both with a 100% worldview.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we're at right now. And we've said this over and over again. J.D. Vance has articulated a biblical worldview more often and with more depth in about 3 months than Mike Pence did in 4 years.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not saying I'm comfortable with having this woman in the White House. I would rather not, because of my spiritual analysis of her. But in terms of just, is she getting in the way right now? I don't think so, and I think J.D. Vance does a lot more for our cause. And this is coming from a Protestant; he's a Catholic. He does a lot more for our cause than Paula White is doing at detriment to it right now. That could change, but that's how I see things.
The fact, first of all, what do you guys think about the fact I chose on social media, which I know the Trump people monitor way more closely than our actual programs? What do you guys think about the fact I chose to deter from what I'm trying to positively influence, to go ahead and single her out and let Lindsey Graham and some of the other poopy endorsements we've seen recently largely just go by the wayside? What do you guys think of my choice to do that?
Well, I think it... Go ahead, Rob.
I think it's important. I think that while I don't think that most people know who she is, it's obviously a bad influence on the president. And I think you're being true to yourself, that you believe that the spiritual has a place here on earth, and that you're making sure that they know that you think that you've got their back, that you really want them to do what is right, and that this rises to a level that the other things don't at this point.
Yeah, because I am right now where you and Aaron are on the Paula White question. To me, that she just chose, I think, to raise this to a level that I thought I had to at least address it. But I am concerned that if it goes on unabated, we will get to where Todd thinks we already are. Because this is clear blaspheming of the Holy Spirit. This is clear blaspheming of the Holy Spirit. And I mean, I'm not God. I don't know. And Lord knows He's been way more patient with me than I would have been with anybody else to bring me to salvation. And He's been way more patient with humanity than we possibly could ever deserve. But patience eventually does run out. There is a hell, right? We all agree on that too. There is a hell. Somebody's there right now as we speak, and it's not just Hitler and Bin Laden, right? There's some other souls there, not named Adolf and Osama, right? Okay, somebody's there. Billions are there, all right? So we all agree that the patience of God eventually wears out. And I am concerned that if she continues on unabated, this level of blaspheming, if we're going to this extent now, you pay me directly for blessing, I think that's a point where maybe God maybe removes an anointing. That's kind of what you're referring to with the Saul stuff.
Yeah. And he may think he's trolling the church just because he's mad out about how Mike Pence turned out, et cetera, but you're playing with forces that you don't understand if that's what you think you're doing.
Yeah, I agree that she's not there yet, but she is approaching the status of problem. More in a moment. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, we are brought to you by our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com. In these unprecedented times, make sure that you venture not into this whole new thing. We're starting this new thing in America. Maybe you've heard of it before. It's called the real estate market. Yeah, this is where, we have private home ownership, and you buy a house, sell that house to somebody else. They then sell a house and buy one from someone else, right? And, we kind of have freedom of movement. I know it's been a minute, like 5 years since we've had this, by and large, between the COVID and Let's Go Brandon. So there's some thoughts that maybe this thing might be attempted yet again. So if you are going to try to take part in terraforming this new industry called real estate, make sure you've got an agent you can trust to guide you through. A lot's changed in the last 5 years since we last had one of these. And we'll help you find that agent where the name says it all, realestateagentsitrust.com. Go there now, realestateagentsitrust.com. We'll hook you up with an agent, probably someone from within this very audience across the country, so someone that shares your value system. One thing you're even going to want to know, even as much as that, a proven track record of success. Otherwise, we wouldn't recommend them to you. realestateagentsitrust.com, whether you want to get across town, across the state, across the country, where you want to go first is realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, we welcome back Rob Eno as we march on with our weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Who killed JFK?
The question isn't so much who killed JFK. The question is, what secrets did JFK possess? Here's Abe Simpson with the answer.
I'll tell you a war story. I was on PT 109 with John F. Kennedy. I was the first to discover his terrible secret. Ich bin ein Berliner. He's a Nazi! Get him!
That's all we have?
So you wanted me to go through 80,000 pages?
No.
And distill it down into 90 seconds.
I thought maybe we could do a little more than that, because I've got to kill 10 minutes here with this topic. But
there's stuff to say.
All right, so let's go. Who watched Glenn's Wednesday special on this? Todd, you did?
I did.
All right. Rob, have you seen it yet?
I've seen parts of it.
Parts of it. All right. Aaron, have you seen any or parts of it at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So at least we can have like a 2.5 person reference to it, because I thought that Glenn's special on this the other night was absolutely fascinating. What did you think?
Yeah, it was excellent.
And I thought it was very balanced, from attempting to recreate Oswald's shots to the files to the various angles. And one of the things that I thought Glenn did a very good job of pointing out is it's maybe not so much who at this point, 60, 70 years later, as much as the how. And that there's a pattern that keeps appearing. And we saw this we saw this appear with Russia collusion, for example. Because one thing that the Glenn special did not mention, I wish it would have, is I keep reiterating this. We did reopen the JFK assassination investigation. We keep kind of forgetting this, but it was reopened in 1979. In response to the church committee and everything else about the, and MK Ultra revelations and about all the abuses of the CIA in the post-World War II era, the House of Representatives in the late 70s did reopen the investigation, I think both into JFK and MLK. And what it found was that Oswald did kill Kennedy, but he did not act alone. He's the one that fired the shots that killed Kennedy, but he was part of an overall conspiracy. The House Select Committee on Assassination specifically pointed to the mob. Glenn pointed out that where you see the CIA's fingerprints just over, or as we know it today, the intelligence community, you see their fingerprints over many of the psyops today. The Hunter Biden laptop wasn't real, right? You kind of see this same game plan has played out now decade after decade after decade. I mean, there's lots of questions about Oswald. And if you watch Glenn's special, you'll see Glenn's considered a good shot, not like a marksman, but he was able to recreate Oswald's shots and make them and pull them off. But if you look at some of the questions around Oswald, how's this guy getting in and out of the Soviet Union all the time? And the CIA knows that he's doing it, right? And he's associated with one of their handlers, Clay Shaw, who's an anti-communist activist in New Orleans. So why is this guy doing all this activity on behalf of communism, yet he's associated with Clay Shaw? A lot of it kind of sounds like Thomas Crooks. Why has this guy got all these, foreign accounts? You see what I'm saying? I mean, why don't we know more about him? And I thought Glenn's special did a phenomenal job, Todd, connecting broader dots about maybe what we know today as the deep state and how it operates.
Absolutely agree. That's the entirety of my analysis, because when you asked us about this originally, I can't remember, was it early this week or late last week, but that's what I said about this. And Glenn entirely agrees. Nobody is really alive anymore to be held accountable for specifically solving the JFK mystery. It's really not about that anymore. That's mostly nostalgic thinking. But the how, because they keep playing the hits unless you stop them. Steve, how many times have you said lately, the demon isn't just going to go away. You're going to have to stop it. You said that in several contexts. We are going to keep being manipulated by our own government over and over and over again unless we acknowledge the truth of what happened then and realize, why wouldn't they keep doing that if we continue to have the soft underbelly that we do? Your analysis and Glenn's totally over the target.
All right, so I'll turn it over now to Rob, and then Aaron. You can comment on that, or just your overall thoughts on what you've seen come forth so far from the, and there's still several independent AIs pouring through these files. There was just another JFK document dumped just yesterday, as a matter of fact. Another terabyte of data came out just yesterday, so they're still not even done giving us all that information. So the floor is open. Rob, what say you?
I got a couple things. I mean, the past 15, 20 years, I've always thought Occam's razor was at play here, right? That John F. Kennedy won because the mob cheated for him in, sorry, not supposed to say that, but the mob cheated for him in Chicago, won him Illinois, which won him the election. And then he put his brother in charge of the Department of Justice, who then went after said mob. I always thought that was the thing. And remember, the mob and the CIA worked hand in hand. I mean, the mob hired the CIA to try and kill Castro a number of times. As I was talking to Jason Butler last week, it was actually a plot line in the Godfather 2 PlayStation 2 game where you were playing one of the Corleone henchmen and you had to try and kill Castro and they wouldn't let you, right? So there was that. But I think, a couple of the things that I got out of the special in the parts that I've seen is one, the gun. When you say that Glenn was able to recreate the shot, he recreated it with the shot from the museum, the Mercury One Museum, of a replica of the gun. If you've ever toured the Mercury One Museum, you've seen that replica. They got it so that they knew that the gun worked. They had to buy the ammunition that fit the gun that only came from Yugoslavia, right? It was it was not readily available ammunition, so Glenn had to wait for that ammunition to come in. They went up to Oklahoma, and they took shots with it. Well, the interesting thing about that gun is that it was a gun that the CIA ran into Yugoslavia and brought back. So that is an interesting link to the CIA. And, so those are the major two things. And then the other big thing is, our friend Alex Jones, if we can call him a friend, had an audio tape that he played a few months ago that he did not verify the authenticity of people talking around. This is the audio tape that intimated that maybe Lyndon Baines Johnson was involved in the plot so that he could become president, kind of a House of Cards type thing. Glenn authenticated that tape.
That's a good point. I forgot about that in the special.
Yeah. Glenn authenticated that tape, and you have people, Brett Baer, liked that post from Glenn this morning of the video of that, of Glenn talking about that. So it's getting mainstream media attention that, okay, wait, this thing has been authenticated now, and maybe Fox will look into it. Maybe somebody else besides us will look into it and do more authentication on that. Because if the sitting vice president of the United States was involved in the assassination of the president of the United States with the help of the intelligence community, we talk about constitutional crises because the current president wants to actually do his job. I mean, that seems like it was a pretty big constitutional crisis.
Thank you for bringing up that confirmed recording. Folks, you just got to go to Blaze TV and watch this thing for yourself. It's really well done. It's barely an hour. We're not doing it justice, okay? But we're giving you some hints of some of the things that you'll see and some of the dots connected. Aaron, what do you think?
So this was back 60-ish years ago. nobody at that time nobody of import knew at that time what the hell an internet protocol was. Obviously, because it's been obfuscated and hidden for so long, there are details that our government did not want us to know and successfully hid for all of this time, generation and a half. So if they were able, back then, before they knew what an internet protocol was, to successfully conceal a lot of details and conceal them when they were on hard copies, as opposed to IP, anything having to do with the internet, which can be concealed, encrypted in numerous different ways. How much worse do you think it is now? To give you an example of what I'm talking about, this difference that I'm talking about. For about a week and a half there were a number of conservative activists, pundits around the country who were swatted. All of us, well, maybe not Todd, because there are no cops around here who like us, but Steve and I, just as a precaution, we called our local police stations just to make sure, hey, this is happening across the country. Make a note of it in your system. Mm-hmm. How are they able to SWAT? I don't know who's behind it, and it's almost impossible to track because there's layers upon layers upon layers of anonymity that the internet can afford you to be able to place these spoof calls saying, hey, I've just murdered my entire family, come and get me, basically. That's basically what a SWAT is, or something along those lines. They didn't have that level of anonymity and layers upon layers of obfuscation that the internet affords us now. They didn't have that back then, but they were still able to conceal whatever it was they were trying to conceal for so long. How much worse do you think it is now? And this takes me back to the developments this week. I was at the place a couple of days ago with the Signal group chat leak that this is just time to move on. I'm still pretty much there. I just thought it was a case of kind of an embarrassing fat thumbs thing. I'm not sure about that anymore. I'm really not, especially given the conversation that we're having right now and where it's gone. Mm-hmm. So trust nothing, verify as much as you possibly can.
Exit question. Do you think Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK? And if you do you think he acted alone? Todd.
Of course he didn't act alone. Do I think he shot a bullet? Yes.
Okay. Rob?
Yes, he didn't act alone. I think it was the mob. I still kind of think it was the mob, and whether they had CIA help or not, but I think it was the mob trying to settle the score.
And that's what the House Select Committee on Assassinations believes. From 79. Aaron?
Yes and no. He did kill him, and he did not, absolutely not act alone.
Let's get to our kicker topic following this train of thought. Issue 4, not counting Epstein. What else would you like the files released for? Todd.
Well, take what I'm saying and remembering what they did to ivermectin during COVID. All Pfizer and government files going all the way back to polio that show the true nature of those viruses versus the fiction that we've been told for decades now about vaccines.
Aaron.
What the hell happened to Anthony Fauci, or with Anthony Fauci between late February and early March of 2020?
That's high on my list, although I like Todd's suggestion too, but that's very high on my list. Rob.
I think we're all going to the same place. I would like all of the files of gain of function research, of COVID, of what governments were talking about, the collusion between governments, what they use to get people to say things that they said to stop our freedom, and whether or not about the lab leak, that they knew it was a lab leak theory and said it wasn't. Everything around COVID up to and including was it a plot to lose Trump the election in 2020?
Agree with all your answers. Let's get to our predictions. Rob, I'm going to let you go first. Go ahead.
I am going to predict that I will continue to be absolutely horrible at picking brackets, and that somebody that nobody thinks is going to win, because I have probably the worst bracket that I've ever had in my life. And that somebody that like an 8 seed is going to win, that's still in there is going to win, because this year has been crazy in the NCAA.
Aaron.
The Supreme Court will indeed make some sort of a decision on reining in the lower courts and the district courts, but it's going to be very narrow in scope. so that John Roberts can say, hey, I did my job, I reigned in the lower courts, but it's only going to apply in a very narrow way.
I'm going to have more to say about that in a minute. Todd, go ahead.
Rachel Ziegler will be cast as the next Wonder Woman. Or in Avengers Doomsday. Who can say?
Isn't everybody cast in Avengers Doomsday? Literally everybody, yes. To follow up on what Aaron said, I predict that Aaron's scenario will happen or Trump will defy an attempted order by a federal judge. This is just we're at a zero-sum aspect of this. And I could absolutely see John Roberts attempting to head off Trump doing a generational reset of his institution by doing some form of Hobby Lobby ruling, some form of ruling against the COVID vaccine mandate. What do I mean by that? Well, in both of those cases, the court, John Roberts and what he said in both those cases is almost apologetic for siding with us. But this was just such a unique individual circumstance that he had no choice but to do so. Okay. So remember the case with Jack the Cake Baker, where the court did rule for him the first time, but they said if you could prove you're not doing this for religious animus, then you can absolutely impose on people's freedoms if you want. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Trying to find some way to avoid making a definitive statement about the original schema of the Constitution and our God-given rights. And I think, Aaron, that's what you're alluding to. Mm-hmm. Him trying to come up with something that clearly pimp slaps his branch so that Trump doesn't feel as if you've left me no alternative but to full Abe Lincoln, you people. I agree that one of those two scenarios is going to happen, and it will happen by the end of this year, maybe by the end of this summer.
Pray summer.
I could absolutely think, and it'll be narrow in scope. Hey, we're not saying that a government could never force you into an experiment against your own will to have a job, but it's just very clear this one wasn't done the right way and all, righteousness was not fulfilled. So we'll just say no this one time, something like that. Rob, good to see you as always, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You bet, man. Take it easy. We'll come back. We've got another hour to go, and it'll be your turn with Feedback Friday when we return. Stay tuned. And greetings, back with Hour 2, live and on demand here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzen and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, please, if you wouldn't mind. You can do so one of several ways. Email the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please also subscribe to our new YouTube channel. We're still trying to get that going. And we're trying. Are we still getting way more views with, 12,000 subscribers now than we were getting with 55 a year ago?
It's in the same vicinity.
How? Explain that to me that doesn't account for any form of shadow banning of the previous account. Is there an explanation for that? No, there's not. So I'm talking to lawyers. There's no explanation for that. So please keep subscribing to our new YouTube channel, and thank you if you had. It's at Deace Show on YouTube. That's the one you want to subscribe to. At Deace Show on YouTube. Again, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you are a podcast listener, thank you. You're a big reason why we did just sign a 3-year contract extension for this show. So please show how much you love the program. Leave us a 5-star review, whichever podcast platform is your preference. Just so you guys know, we have switched. I think I mentioned this a couple times earlier this week. We switched our main category on iTunes for the time being to put us in the religion and spirituality section, because we are specifically trying to wake up the church. We just cannot have a sustainable model where even the best of political coalitions are ahead of the church in exhibiting moral courage in the public sphere. That just isn't sustainable. All right, so we're doing what we can right now to try and maybe draw some stragglers of people that are going to some of those soft-headed churches, of which there are legion. And they might be looking for something more. So if you guys could help us, if you've not left us a 5-star review before, this is now the time. I mean, any time would be great, but now especially. All right, so thank you for that. We're actually in the top 30 of that entire category right now. And it's kind of funny, too, when you look at that category, we're also pretty unique amongst many of these shows in that category as well. I don't know what category we actually belong in. All right, other programming. Is there another programming category?
Oh, yeah, we used to be in other programming.
We used to be other programming back in the old CRTV days, yes. All right. So please subscribe. Thank you if you have. Hit us up as well with a subscribe or a follow if you're on iTunes, and that'll make sure every time we do a new episode, it shows up in your feed. Also, make sure to hit up our friends over at Voice of Judah Israel. Their mission is to live out what the Apostle Paul says in Romans 1, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. And today their heart is for the Holy Land. They're trying to reach the 6.5 million Jews who are estranged from their Messiah, Yeshua. We know him in English as Jesus. There's 9 million Israelis of different religious, a total, not just Jewish, but of various religious persuasions that also are outside the grace of God. And this is one of the most secular nations on earth, in fact, is the nation of Israel right now. So they're there being the hands and feet of the gospel, meeting the Israeli communities with charitable works, but also preaching, teaching, discipleship, catechesis, the full gospel. They're trying to bring the gospel back home to the place that gave it to the rest of the world. If you want to learn more about this initiative and or even support it, go to vojisrael.org/Steve. That's VOJ for Voice of Judah, vojisrael.org/Steve. Again, that's vojisrael.org/Steve. Speaking of which, so we've not had a Feedback Friday since we had this conversation with Ray Fava a couple of weeks ago. Between vacation and things that came up, it's been 2 or 3 weeks since we've done a Feedback Friday. So I thought it would be interesting, if maybe even fair. I saved a couple of notes from Jewish members of this audience to get their reaction to the conversation we had with Ray Fava over at Evangelical Dark Web a couple of weeks ago. So I thought, you guys, let's lead off with that. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with this note from Risha Schwartz. And she says, my father was a Holocaust survivor. I'm 47, the youngest in my family. He was only 10 when the war ended. Growing up, we lived in the shadow of deep trauma. The survivor community was full of incredible people, but they had been through literal hell. Maybe we as a people sometimes see anti-Semitism, therefore, too easily, as if Nazis are lurking everywhere. My father hated that. He felt the word was overused and feared it would ultimately harm Jewish people. He may have been right. That's me being as charitable as I can to the guest, Ray Fava, you had on. 2 books came to mind after that show. In Defying Hitler, Sebastian Hafner describes how society started speaking of the Jewish problem without ever defining what the problem was, just that it existed. That reminds me of the vague, ominous rhetoric that I hear online today, just asking questions or questioning the narrative. It's chilling. The second book, account rendered by Melita Moshman, I believe is her name, recounts how ordinary Germans harbored anti-Semitic views about the, quote, Jewish people, while still liking their Jewish friends and neighbors. That same mental trick is used today, saying it's not the Jewish people, it's Zionism. Or I think maybe sometimes you hear it's not the Jewish people, it's just Judaism. This distancing allowed the German people to ignore the suffering of actual individuals while condemning an abstract group. I can't respond on a Christian level, but as an American and a Jew, I believe in the worth of the individual. Jews, like all people, have done both good and bad because that's human nature, but the American ideal is to judge people by their actions, not their group identity. I also read The Fourth Turning, and it certainly feels like we're in the thick of it. I agree, gatekeeping isn't the answer. Engaging with people, even difficult ones, is necessary. As a Jewish woman, I appreciated you having him on, though I'll admit it was hard to hear, especially when he called Judaism evil. I understood his argument, but it was still painful. Yet these are the conversations that matter. Glenn Beck once spoke about a Polish woman who saved Jews during the war. When asked what made her different, she simply said, I never got on the train. She saw the runaway train of hatred and refused to move with it. That has always stuck with me. It's a powerful guide for the challenges we face today. Thank you for your thoughtful and important show. You guys have any thoughts on what Risha had to say?
That was, aside from the content of it, that was one of the most encouraging things I've heard this year so far. Because as she alluded to, it certainly seems like we're in the thick of a turning. And that means that things that we took for granted, coalitions that we took for granted, things that we just thought would always be the way that they are, always would remain that way, are changing. And that's difficult. That's difficult to contend with sometimes. And I think a lot of people are having difficulty just analyzing the world as it is, not as maybe you want it to be or you think it should be. And so what this amounts to is a lack of grace, a lack of giving people the benefit of the doubt in what they're trying to accomplish. But I heard that in spades. That was charitable to the nth degree, that entire message. And that was personally very encouraging to me to hear that.
What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I think I try to make this point about the fourth turning, and because it's discussed largely in an American context, and the American story is perceived to be full of great successes and heroism, that we always end up clean on the other side, to borrow from Shawshank Redemption. But she has a great sensibility that's not true, and that's why we need to question all of our A priorities, because this turning, the new established norms, can be very dicey, if not flat out ugly. It's not just a resetting of eternal goodness. It's nothing of the kind, and she has a sense of being able to currently navigate that's grown-up thinking, and we need to encourage more of it.
Agreed. The thing you guys just said. I think you can also hear from Risha's note, she understands the tension of what it means to live in a free society. You have to be willing to hear things you find hurtful. Because here's the thing, even if you're right, it's a subjective standard. If we're up against right now a spirit of the age that says someone's feelings are an objective measure. No, they're not. That which, just because you're offended doesn't mean you shouldn't be. You don't have a right to not be offended. We can't have freedom with subjective standards. Well, what offends me? When I first started out in this business, I was very hesitant about being on Christian radio networks. Well, Steve, I thought you wanted a biblical worldview to be the plumb line, the cornerstone of your show, which is exactly why I was hesitant about it. Because on the Christian radio network, a lot of times the standard's very subjective. Did I say the word sucks too much, and therefore some little old lady that gives a bunch of money to the network is offended? Did I use a certain amount of incendiary language to make a point, which frankly there are numerous biblical examples of that exact same language to make exact similar points, but because we're so soft-headed and yellow-bellied, we don't preach those scriptures anymore. That's why we did that evergreen a few months ago. Okay, we've decided we have to put a condom on the Bible. We have to make it safe preaching, prophylactics on the scriptures, safe for consumption, so it doesn't spread. Okay. We take a double-edged sword, and instead of sharpening it, we numb it. Make sure it's dull enough to be, quote unquote, received. Where in the commercial arena, like when Mitt Romney's company, Bain Capital, bought the radio station I was on, WHO Radio, right after I took Mitt Romney out in the Iowa caucuses, right afterwards. And people, I can't tell you how many people in my office came up to me and said, dude, you might be toast. I thought I might be toast. Funny thing happened, though. You know what Bain Capital cared about? You know how many times they asked me what my opinions were about Mitt Romney 2012 after I took out Mitt Romney 2008? You know how many times Bain Capital asked me my thoughts about Mitt Romney 2012? What do you think the number is?
Small.
Real small. 0. How many questions do you think they had about my ratings books and what numbers I was pulling?
Lots.
A lot. That was all their questions. In fact, it was all their questions. All their questions were, how many ads are we going to sell and what's the price point per unit? In the commercial arena, that's the objective standard. Can we make you money or not? I could live with that. I thought I was better off working with Bain Capital than I did with a Christian radio station. Because at least I know what Bain Capital wants, rent. They just want rent. If I can deliver the rent, great. If I can't, then whose fault is that? Mine. And then I can live with it, right? I can't live by what soothes your subjective standard. So we have to be willing to tolerate things we find detestable or offensive. Because that's a subjective standard. And so I appreciate the fact that Risha understands that tension. And we need more of that kind of understanding. Like the whole thing going on right now about questions. I don't have a problem with questioning Winston Churchill in the World War II narrative. Ask any question you want. I don't have a problem if you don't understand or want to believe in anything. I don't have a problem if your response to my response to the last few years is I got to reassess what I thought about the vaccine industry for the last 35 years of my adult life. So I don't have a problem with that. My problem is, though, where are we going to go for the answers? So don't ever get upset that someone's just asking questions. Ask them, well, then where do we go for the answers? Because that'll tell you if they're just asking questions because they're trying to retcon Adolf, or if they're really a critical thinker that has something unique to say that might be even offensive, but maybe we still need to hear it. You see what I'm saying? Where then would we go for answers? When the enemy came into the garden and said, did God really say? That was with the intent of gaslighting. That was a deconstruction. It was an attempt to remove, not to seek truth. He was not asking for clarity. Instead, he was trying to spread confusion. His point was to detach Adam and Eve from God. That was what he was tempting them to do, sever the connection. And they took the bait. I don't have a problem. You want to email me every day, you don't believe in Jesus, here's why. I'll answer all the questions you can if I've got answers. I probably don't have answers to some of them. I'm not an oracle. I'm happy to answer those questions all day long. So it's not about asking questions. It's about where are the answers? Where are the answers?
And do you really want them?
That's because that gets to that's because let's face it. And that's in the eye of the beholder. There are people that are just asking questions because they've already got the answers they want you to accept instead. Okay. And they're gaslighting you. And then there are people that are just asking questions because they're earnest truth seekers. And then there are people that are just asking questions because they're nihilist along the lines of what you're talking about. This is unavoidable. We destabilized. We post truth to our own society. Our institutions failed us and we let them fail us. So it's where we are. But Risha's instincts also from her father, it sounds like. You know, one good way to convince people there's a secret Jewish cabal running the world is to make Jews the one group of people you're not allowed to criticize. I kind of sense that's in a way what Risha was saying. 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. If you want to diffuse arguments that you represent a secret group of people that you just can't criticize, then don't have federal legislation which says uniquely you can't criticize Jewish people. I was dead set against that when that whole thing came out last year. Dead set against it. And that's coming from someone who thinks we ought to take every one of those foreigners that are gays, that are trans for Hamas, and deport every last one of them in a nanosecond. But no. You're not, there's no group that is immune from being criticized. So I thought, Risha, your note was very, you know what, I'm going to use a term we don't use a lot nowadays. Risha, that was very adult. Looking for distinctions, nuances. That was very adult. Let's go next here. Sam Imiak. He says, I think it's important for the Jews in the audience to respond to the positions laid out by your guest a couple of weeks ago. Firstly, as a disclaimer, I 100% believe you, Todd, and Aaron don't have an anti-Semitic bone in your bodies. You have Jews on all the time. I think you're well aware of the divide inside the Jewish community on how we break down from a voting demographic. I certainly appreciate the love you've shown for the Jewish people post-October 7th. There is an incredibly significant factor of anti-Semitic Christians like your guest that your guests don't recognize or ignore. Judaism is the world's primary ethno-religion. There are two parts to being a Jew. First, have a mother who is Jewish. That makes you a member of the Jewish nation. The biblical source for this is in the book of Deuteronomy. The second factor that can make someone Jewish, and you, by the way, in the New Testament, Sam, this is followed through with Timothy. Timothy's mother, Paul's spiritual son, Timothy's mother is Jewish. His father is Greek. And so therefore, how does Paul identify Timothy? Jewish. There are two parts to being a Jew. First, you have a mother who is Jewish. This makes you a member of the Jewish nation. The biblical source for this is in the book of Deuteronomy. The second factor that can make someone Jewish is following the 613 commandments of Moses. It is imperative to note it's impossible for an individual to fulfill all 613 commandments. If you ask Orthodox Jews, who we can agree are the ones who understand and keep the religion of Judaism, which of these two factors we care about more, it's undoubtedly the second. Keeping the Torah is of primary importance to us. The members of my family, both extended and national, who are not religious, while I love them dearly, are referred to by our community as, quote, off the path. I think our term for it is backslidden. I think that's the term we have. Meaning they are members of the Jewish people, however, they are abrogating their responsibilities as members of a Jewish nation. Keeping the Torah is the primary source of our religious identity. Anti-Semites, and Hitler was clear on this in Mein Kampf, only care about the former. It matters to your guests not a wink that I keep the Sabbath, eat strictly kosher food, celebrate the holidays, wrap the phylacteries on my arm, and tithe my income, etc. None of my religious observance is important to him. What makes me a Jew is that my mother was one, and her mother, going all the way back to Abraham and Sarah. So we see this is just a matter of hating those who Christians in particular have struggled with hated for a millennia. I can repeat my emails from the last few years going through the Jewish arguments against Christianity, and I'd be happy to do so at any time, but that is of less importance today than to close with an area of agreement I have with your guest. It is popular among prominent Jews to say that Jews and Christians have the same God. I understand why they say this, but I don't believe this to be the case. In this, I agree with your guest. Tanakh is clearly that God alone created and sustains the world. We believe there is no intermediary necessary for our salvation, and we pray to him alone, as we see in Numbers 23:19 or 1 Samuel 15:29. So I do agree, while our religions share a text, our fundamental understanding of God and his nature are radically different. If America is a country strictly for a narrow group of evangelical Christians, as your guest made plain, we're not going to sustain very long as a nation. It would be my hope that those who are, as you would describe, spirit-filled believers would repudiate this repugnant ideology espoused by your guest with as much fervor as we can muster. I pray we all continue to have the strength to combat the evil forces in our own camps as we do the same forces on the demonic left. With love from Sam. I think there are numerous responses we could have to this. I'll let you guys take this one first. What do you think?
Well, the agreement we've talked about in different contexts, whereas we obviously don't believe the same things. Steve, you've said this numerous times about Daniel, and we don't need to pretend that we do to be friends or fight in common purpose. Again, I am not remotely threatened by a Jew who is honest enough to say, yeah, I don't, the heightened summit of my entire belief system, I don't believe that. I don't believe you inherently, just by saying those words, you personally insulted me and caused me to crawl into a corner. I just think that's honest rhetoric. So I don't remind her, him or her, forgive me, I don't resetting that at all.
Sam, it's a Sam. Yep. Aaron?
Yeah, again, it's a very adult response, because that interview, if you didn't have any idea what the show was about, and you just came into that interview just cold and kind of out of context, I can't imagine that you would have the level of responses that we're hearing right now. You would think, wow, this show platforms somebody like that. But I really appreciate the attempt to kind of meet out and discuss this and work through it. That was my entire point a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. Let's work through this instead of just throwing everything aside, canceling everyone. So I appreciate, again, very measured responses we've heard.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said. And I think in both notes, And I want to thank both Risha and Sam. And they weren't the only ones, but I thought they were very thoughtful ones that I thought could speak for a broad consensus of the feedback from Jewish listeners that we received. I think, in general, as adults, you know what? I'm going to quote Joel Webbin, okay? Just to prove my own point. When he was on our show a couple days ago and he talked about my ability to think in categories. That's another way of saying distinctions. We cannot live in a pluralistic society without distinctions. As a species, we cannot govern ourselves without distinctions. For example, I'm going to take Sam's note. He did not send a note with the intent of having a theological treatise back and forth. Okay? And so I won't nitpick his note as if he did. Because if I'll have a distinction here. Sam wants a critical thinking society of truth pursuit. That's pretty much what we want. We might disagree on where truth is and who truth is and where truth is found, but I mean, I'm pretty confident Jesus is king of the universe. So I'm pretty confident if we just go ahead and have this kind of a distinction-filled critical thinking society, Jesus is going to win that argument. If I didn't think that, he's probably not much of a king of the universe. See what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay. I have no problem with pluralism. I mean, if I didn't do distinctions and instead just wanted to justify my narrative, I would pounce on Sam's note and make a point like this, for example. I would say, well, if you both agree that you can't keep the law, and at the same time, you're in no need of a mediator for the law, you're kind of in a theological no man's land. I mean, if I can't keep the commands God gave me, Sam did say that, I can't keep the commands God gave me. And then at the same time, Sam also said, but we don't believe we need a mediator. Well, I mean, someone's got to fulfill the law then. You admitted you can't, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to spend 30 minutes doing that. Because that's not the spirit. That's not the spirit of the note that Sam sent me. And Jesus is very clear in the Gospels on numerous occasions that the spirit of the thing matters as much as the letter of the thing. If I broad base Jews as a group negatively, and a lot of the people who do that detest dispensational theology, which is funny because that's also what dispensational theology does with Jews, but just the other way. They also say, well, why do you think it is that Jews are uniquely wealthy, uniquely successful? Because they're God's chosen people. You see what I'm saying? This is another way of, that might be right. I'm not here to win an argument against dispensationalism. Frankly, I'm not qualified to singularly wield and wasn't given any apostolic authority by God to reconcile and solve. My point being, though, if we are applying, well, Jews control the banks and Jews control this, so that must mean they are a broad-based negative group. On the other hand, if we're like, well, Jews are predisposed to be successful, Jews are predisposed in multiple arenas. Despite all the torture and persecution they have faced for centuries, would that not be evidence that they remain God's chosen people and the covenant still with Abraham is still being fulfilled? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I can do this both ways. In either case, I'm actually not doing exegesis. I'm doing eisegesis. I am taking a cultural event or phenomenon or trend, and I am imposing it on the scriptures. The great irony of those who are rabidly replacement theology and rabidly dispensational, when they disagree on Jews, they're actually way closer to one another than they could possibly imagine. And so there I've done it again. I've taken the position that will just be the most offensive of them all. It's just my way. But in both cases, you're analyzing a cultural trend and imposing it on the biblical narrative. you're really not that much different from one another. Maybe that's why you don't like each other that much. And maybe you're arguing over the wrong Jew. I kind of think most of our arguments really ought to be about Jesus, who he is, and what he thinks and what he says. I think that's what we should be arguing about more. And I don't mean that in a, we just preach Jesus here. I don't mean that. I mean like King of the universe, creator of the universe. Every knee bows, every tongue confesses Jesus. That's the Jew we ought to be arguing about. The vast majority of our arguments ought to be about who is he, really, and what's he really demand of us. Those of you that are so fixated on in the dispensational camp, you're so fixated on what's going on in Israel, you can't bother to show up at a school board meeting because you've got to find out whether the Jews have taken another square inch back of the Temple Mount. You're wrong. I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And now, on the other hand, well, there's a secret cabal. And if it wasn't for the nation of Israel and these Zionists, we wouldn't have these endless wars, and the Muslims would leave us alone. You're wrong. There's no historical framework of fact that justifies your spot at all. In fact, it's a complete repudiation of it. And yet I sit here in my Twitter feed all day long and watch these two camps go back and forth at each other. And it's funny. They're both arguing about Jews. With the same argument, just a different conclusion. A cultural trend that I have noticed justifies my narrative, so I pounce. Positive or negatively.
Didn't you say earlier in this show that, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of the modern church really sucks?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Proposal. We should argue more about a Jew named Jesus of Nazareth than actual Jews. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. At least on this show. All right, we'll get back to the rest of your feedback here in a moment. Stay tuned. I know we talk a lot about preparedness on this show because we learned during the scamdemic, man. We have to have our heads on a swivel. We've got to be prepared. And that's when we first connected with our friends over at Jace Medical, and they've been with us for the last few years because you never know. You never know. We have one state now, Arkansas, that is, thank you, Governor Huckabee Sanders.
Whoop pig suey.
Yep. We've got one state now that's letting you buy ivermectin over the counter. The Nobel Prize winning drug, one of the great marvels of modern medicine, that they then went out and when I say Nobel Prize, I'm not talking like in the 60s. 2015, 5 years before the scandemic, it won the Nobel Prize. And they went out there and Thanos snapped and retconned that thing faster than you can say REM death is near. And that's when Jace Medical came on board and said, hey, there's some other pretty venerable medications too they could do this to, like, amoxicillin, penicillin, doxycycline, others. So that's the original vision of the Jace case, to get backups of those venerable medications just in case. Get the Jace case. Now you can also expand it, though. The company's grown the last couple of years. You can expand it to offerings like the aforementioned ivermectin. All right, so go to jace.com/Deace. Enter the code Deace at checkout. Get your Jace case. You can get the OG version, or you can pay a little more and expand it to more customizable options. The discount will count for both when you use the code Deace at checkout. Promo code Deace at jace.com. They're also, by the way, still doing a giveaway for a free case here in the month of March. So you can register for that free giveaway as well to get your own free case, and then purchase your own while you're there too. Jace.com is where you want to go. Promo code Deace at Jace, J-A-S-E, jace.com.
You want to get really Vanta Black for a second? There's been more evidence coming out all the time about ivermectin success stories, not just related to COVID, but to other things.
I know.
And it's because of the recency you just mentioned. I suggest, this is just me talking, that the actual timing of COVID to anoint mRNA technology is in reaction to the medical community's understanding and the pharma community's understanding of how successful ivermectin could just be to our health paradigms, and we can't allow that to happen because how are we going to make money?
Thanks, Todd.
I can't blame you.
Thanks for sharing that on a Friday. Appreciate it.
But you know what? This is actually a great analog to what we were just saying. Because of what we've undergone, I don't have a problem with people that are questioning everything. Even a few years ago, Todd would probably not even, if he thought this, would have thought, if I say this on this show, Steve is going to look at me like I've got both eyes out of the same socket. Okay? I don't know how anybody could come to the conclusion that we need to ask fewer questions after the last few years. I don't. The debate is, where are we going for answers? We can't have a society on just asking questions, guys. At some point, there's got to be answers. And I can promise you this. The answers are coming from light or they're coming from dark. And if the light doesn't want to answer the questions, the dark will fill in the blanks for you just fine. Because where we go for answers determines whether just asking questions is, did God really say gaslighting? Or whether it's a sincere seeking of truth. Where do we go for the answers? Let's go back to you for more Feedback Friday. This is from Renee. Hey, I'm a faithful follower of you guys and Allie Beth Stuckey. I love your shows. I'm wondering if you have any advice for a newbie. How do I get saved and where do I start? I'd like to find a church, but I'm not sure how to even find one. I'm very curious about the Bible, but not sure how to start reading it. Any advice you have, I'd appreciate it. My advice would be to start back to front in your questions. I would pick up the Bible and I'd just start reading the Gospels. And allow God to relate to you directly by seeing in his word how he related directly to people like you. And I'd say this to Renee, and I'd say this to everybody in the audience. If you're a sincere spiritual seeker, where do you start? Because I got to tell you, that's a lot simpler question than telling you what church to look for. Oh my gosh. I mean, I like the church we're in now, but my opinion of the American church, it's week to week. Okay? I mean, it is. It's week to week. I mean, any church I walk into, just assume if I walk into your church, you're on probation. Perpetually. I don't know, man. Okay? I'm way more comfortable answering your second question than the first. In fact, I'm just going to pass. Pass! I don't know. I know we need church. I know we need to meet. I know we need to corporately worship. I know we need to corporately hear the word of God. And we corporately need one another. That I know for sure. So I'm not an advocate for lone rangers and free agents. Well, I'm walking the nature trail. Okay, maybe every few months, maybe cool. Every Sunday? No, you're not. No, you're not communing to God in nature every Sunday. All right? Unless you're a druid. And that's not God. Okay? That wicker man's not your friend. Run. Run, Nicolas Cage, run. Okay? The church systemically in America is in a rough patch, which is why we temporarily rebranded our show. And I don't know how long temporary it'll be. Might be a week, might be a month, might be 5 years. I don't know. Okay. The church is in a rough spot. But the word of God remains the only perfect thing ever placed on this earth, Renee. I'd pick it up, and to all the Renees in this audience, I would look for something like a New King James or an ESV. Is my own personal bias. It's just because those are word-for-word translations in contemporary English. There's others too, though, that are good too. All right? And I'd start with the Gospels. Just open up the Gospel of Matthew. Start there. The first of the Gospels. And read all 4 Gospels all the way through. And begin with God, letting God's word relate to you through seeing how God related to people exactly like you. You guys want to add anything to that? You good with that answer? What do you think?
I would start with Mark personally, only because it's a quicker, more. It's kind of like a graphic novel read, very, very fleshy, human based, not the higher order thinking that goes into some of the elaborated parts, especially right out of the gate with Matthew. I think that can be more challenging and more cerebral in a way that might exhaust some people. Other people, it may be the exact thing you're looking for. So, but I mean, yeah, pick any one of them. My usual default is Mark. As a Catholic, I would be remiss in saying and obviously we accept the fact that we disagree on things like this, but in terms of one of the benefits of Catholicism, if you at least allow to think about in your picking and choosing, is that as frustrating as a sermon can be, current leadership can be, et cetera, the sacramental economy that we have is a constant. It is not relation to the time, the place, the emotion of anything. It is the Eucharist is there, the confessional is there, so that can be a North Star. And one other thing I would ask, and I found this, the light bulb in my head went on from Steve in the story he has relayed in talking about Catholic exorcists involved in his movie. But do you recall, Steve, what the Catholic exorcist told you ultimately, and this relates distinctly to your question, ultimately what the most important thing is in terms of whether it's efficacious or not?
The person has to truly want to turn away from the darkness.
Yes, because ultimately all of us are involved in an exorcism in some way, shape, or form.
And what Father Martin's told me is that usually the person actually just wants to restore the relationship to the darkness back when the darkness was wooing them and doing things for them. All right, but doesn't want to actually be fully removed from the idolatry of that.
So my point is, you're going to go down this road earnestly, but you'll be challenged. The devil doesn't want this to happen. So I'm asking you, how bad do you want it? Because this is not, Luke Skywalker, this is not going to go the way you think it's going to go. So that's the first question you need to reconcile with yourself.
Yeah,
are you dabbling, or do you, not knowing how you're going to get there, not knowing if you're going to turn it down at one
define
point?
dabbling. Dabbling doesn't mean you've got it all figured out.
No,
we're just, I'm going to let me see if you grab my attention in the first page. If not, then, back to my, latest James Patterson novel or something. That's not, so there's different kinds of dabbling. Yeah. Aaron, you good with that?
Yeah, I think so. I just want to underscore, yes, you're playing, you only know your motivation, okay? None of us here do, because we're not God. That's between you and God. What is your motivation here? Be very honest with yourself about that. Is it what Todd was saying, or are you truly a real seeker, not the seeker that we talk about in the seeker-sensitive churches, which are not really seekers, they're more along the lines of what Steve was just describing. But are you truly seeking? Mm-hmm. And then I don't know. Just off the top of my head, Luke has always been my favorite gospel.
And if you're a Christmas person, you'll be very familiar with Luke at the beginning, because that's all you've heard at Christmas time.
Yeah, Luke has always been. It's very straightforward, very linear in structure. The next thing maybe read is Colossians. Colossians is, we did an entire Theology Thursday series on Colossians. It is, who is Jesus? Christology. That's a really good study.
Let's have a real Jewish argument.
And then James is probably the next book maybe that I would read.
Well, Todd is just, he's swooning now. Yeah, that you said that. Camille wants to know if I could speak a little more on Gen X's contribution to the last election. I'm especially wanting your take on our upbringing, maybe being the latchkey generation. Did that affect our voting at all? Did growing up in the Reagan era have any kind of huge effect on our voting and overall thinking? Well, I can give you numbers first, Camille. 45 to 64-year-olds were the largest generational demographic, I should say, to vote in 2024. Let me repeat that. 45 to 64-year-olds were the largest generational demo to vote. Who's 45 to 64? Gen X. We were the largest demographic to vote. Trump won Gen X by 10 points before we even stratify for gender, ethnicity, or race. So there's all kinds of conversation about young men, and hey, I want to make sure I'm in on the conversation with young men. The church tried to reach Mildred in the suburbs for the last 25 years. It's time to reach Cade, trying to launch out of his mom and dad's home now. Fair? Time to reach Cade. Or Zach. Okay? All right? Or in my case, Noah. Okay? Time to reach those guys. All right? That being said, though, for all the focus on young men, Gen X won the last election. The data's clear. They voted more than any other demographic did, and Trump won them by 10 points. So, I mean, you could even go so far as to say, given that, if you view this as an existential election, then Gen X basically played a pivotal role in a turning of the tide in America. As to why, I don't know. I was a latchkey kid at times. Maybe, did that invoke more independence? I don't know. It could. Also made you way more prone to bad influences, being exposed to them way too early. I mean, I don't know too many Gen Xers, man, unless you grew up like you were blessed to grow up in like a hardcore homeschool family, which in Gen X would not have been a lot of kids. It's like 12% of the kids now. It would have been like 2% when we were growing up. If you didn't grow up in that, chances are you were probably exposed to pornography by the time you were 10 or 11 years old. Even if the pornography was just Skinamax on a, distorted screen at 11 o'clock after your parents went to bed. So I really don't think it's so much about how we were raised, but the fact that we are now doing the raising. And that our generation has the kids who are either launching or about to launch. And we are very concerned about the tipping point moment that we are at. I think it's probably more about that. You have any thoughts on this, fellow Gen Xer, Todd?
Yeah, I think we default in one of two directions. I think we confuse God with just getting along and being nice. And when that side wins over in us, our generation votes for Democrats. Our generation is also very much addicted to comfort. And when we default to that thing, and both sides can happen for relatively good or relatively bad reasons. But when it's comfort, we decide to the right. And people were getting very, very uncomfortable, both economically and which pronoun am I supposed to use and yada, yada, yada. And they just wanted it to stop. I want it to stop too.
Yeah.
But my motivations tend, and I know this just from the people I talk to, are less comfort-based and more cosmically based. But I think that's how our generation rolls. We are a very shallow pool. We're not that hard to figure out. And every individual's got their own story, as Steve just said. But broadly speaking, that's pretty much it.
I don't disagree with that. Let's close with this from Mike Anderson. He says, top 5 masculine things Todd has done that Steve would not. Built a fire just to watch it burn. I've built a fire before. Was to actually use it, but not just to watch it burn. Changed his own oil. I've never done that. Owns and has used a wrench. I own several wrenches. I've used them several times. Camped in a tent in the woods. I've done that too. Got to remember, I went to zoo school, dude. We lit fires and camped in the woods. I've done much of this stuff.
Might be the greatest sentence. You got to remember, I went to zoo school.
And I would not have done that.
Otherwise, you're listen. If it had not been for zoo school, Mike, this would have landed. Okay, but since I did have to go to zoo school, I got to go to zoo school. I did much of this stuff. Made it through the Christmas season without pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
I don't know, because you do pumpkin pie every holiday season. You love your pumpkin pie. Have you done a holiday with no pumpkin pie ever before? Like the entire holiday season? Never once at any dinner?
Oh, yeah.
You have, Aaron?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
See that? If you're going to do this list, because I haven't even, I've never changed my own oil. Like I'm actually way closer to Steve on that scale, the handyman scale or what. Like I can't, Aaron's
Yes,
this
Aaron's
would
the
have
one
been
who
an
makes
Aaron
end tables for long holiday
This would have been an
weekends.
Aaron versus Steve
Yes.
list. I'm not. Yeah, I don't have that level of game.
Yeah, I've done all those things.
There you go. Aaron's more man than me. It's settled. It's a great way to note. That's a great note to end the week on, right there. Aaron's just more of a man than me.
Thanks.
Well, he has to be to get the 100% worldview score, doesn't he?
It's already been proven. It's documented, in fact, yes. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll be back again on Monday. Until then, Romans 8:28.